All right, party people, thanks for coming. Really appreciate. My name is Alex Nascimento, and I'm here to talk about some business applications of blockchain. My background comes from angel investment and digital marketing. I teach a course called Business Applications at UCLA in Los Angeles. And we co-founded UCLA Blockchain Lab and Blockchain at UCLA with the effort of educating, creating a community, doing research and development, and teaching people from the business world the different applications and use cases of blockchain. So definitely the course is a non-technical course, but it's the first required course of the curriculum so that even developers can understand what this technology can do in order so that they can develop more efficient dApps, right? We talk about a lot of people in the business world not having the same mindset or being able to talk with developers, so that was the whole idea of having this course as an initial course. So I'm going to run through a little bit of the basics just as good house cleaning, and then we're going to dive into a lot of what's actually being done by large corporations and what I think the future is. A lot of my research goes around security tokens, which in my opinion is going to be what we're going to see 2019 be all about. So I hope you guys enjoy. So as we all know, we're here in a blockchain conference. This is the world without blockchain. All information goes into a centralized body. And fast forward, we're now in a world of a distributed ledger, where anything of value can be recorded in an immutable fashion. So what is this, recording, and why couldn't I just record it in a centralized database? And I like this little picture here because the whole idea is that if I take a picture with my phone and send it to you, now I have a copy of that picture and you have a copy of that picture. In a distributed ledger blockchain fashion, if I take a picture of this great audience here and send it to one of you, I no longer have that picture. And then when you send it to someone else in the audience, you no longer have that picture, someone else does. So you cannot go around and make copies of the Mona Lisa because we are now in a single immutable file world, right? And this is actually what brings us to the possibility of having a cryptocurrency. Because what is the value of the dollar? What is the value of a Picasso? What is the value of a Mona Lisa? There is no value unless we all in this room here agree that we give it a certain value, right? So this whole idea of not being able to duplicate the file gives us the opportunity to have cryptocurrencies. Obviously, the most popular cryptocurrency out there, and what I call the son of the blockchain, is the Bitcoin. So I like this little funny picture here because Bitcoin is actually the son of blockchain. But we're not here to talk about cryptocurrencies. We're here to talk about use cases and business applications of this great technology. So for a good period of time, people were just playing around with this idea of, we all agree that a certain line of code like Bitcoin is worth something, and in between us we share it, and I'll give you, I'll clean your house for that line of code, and you give me 2 lines of code, and then I'll buy some fancy computerware with that, right? But that was only in a matter of exchanges. So this guy here, Vitalik Buterin, decided to tell the world, Mom, stop sending me Bitcoin because there's something better out there. And this is what I call the Ethereum Revolution. What is it worth just being able to exchange cryptocurrencies around for things that I would do it for $1, right? If you think about it, there isn't that much value in it because the dollar is already there. What it was before was that you could bypass a lot of the fees and not have it be in the hands or hostage to central banks. But now, with the idea of Ethereum, it's metaphorically if I get a $100 bill and I would write a contract on that $100 bill that says, Alex will get that $100 bill if he comes and cleans your house and if the house is clean by the end of the day, right? So that contract that I write on a $100 bill will only allow me to spend that $100 bill if your house is clean by the end of the day. So that breakthrough of a smart contract is, in my opinion, what brought us to 2016 and 2017 boom of the blockchain industry and why we're all sitting in this room. Because now businesses can utilize these cryptocurrencies and can utilize the blockchain because we're now in agreement of a contract, of an automated contract. So think about it like in the picture of a robotic lawyer. So maybe some of you here are lawyers, you have friends who are lawyers, maybe they will be out of business in a few years. So what is this idea of a smart contract, right? I write it down on a $100 bill, and then it automatically enforces, right? Like the previous speaker was saying, the stage of today of an automatic contract, of a smart contract, is mainly done via ERC20 tokens, which is on the Ethereum platform, and they are immutable. There is a series of advancements being done so that if we have a contract that I'm going to clean your house, but I think it's clean and you think it's not because I didn't dust your piano or I did not clean the toilet, then we got to have a mediation. So a lot of what's being done in an evolution is that you have a smart contract which is immutable code, but you also have a picture or an image of that contract on the blockchain so that if there is a discrepancy between what I did and what you wanted me to do, then a mediator or a judge could go and read that image and it would be treated as a legal document. So we're still in the phases of evolving, but the whole idea of a contract is not new. It started like in about '94 with Nick Szabo. So how does a smart contract work? So I guess we all here might know it. We match buyer and seller. If the contract receives the asset, it distributes the funds, right? And then there is a tracking of that. So you could use that for a lot of things. One of the good things would be transactions that use escrows in nowadays, like real estate transactions, right? Where you don't trust the other party, but you want his house. So you give the money first, it sits in escrow while they transfer the paperwork, then it clears. So a really good metaphor of what a smart contract is an automated escrow account. Some different business applications of what we see today. Retail is one that I like very much. Who here eats or likes organic food? I do. All right, keep your hand up. Keep your hand up if you believe you're eating 100% organic. See, just one person. All right, you're a believer, my friend, and I like you. All right, so now with a smart contract and with the blockchain, potentially we could challenge if Whole Foods is really delivering 100% organic food, because we can see if the traceability of all the product that went into that final good is really what they're telling it is. If it was locally sourced, if it is organic, if it was socially responsible. Another thing that will happen, analogous to what the previous speaker mentioned, is that it's going to be really hard for you to distribute fake goods. So if you are planning on giving your wife a knocked off Gucci bag for Christmas and thinking that she's not going to find it, well, then I would think twice. You could also think about retail having more people and social inclusion in areas of emerging markets. So if you think about places like Africa or Latin America or in remote areas where people don't have access to banks and therefore they can't go to a shop and swipe a credit card, with the blockchain and with smart contracts, you're going to see people using wallets and not necessarily having to travel to a bank to open an account, right? I could just from Atlanta send money or currency or digital currency out to my friends in Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America or any other emerging market, and with just a simple phone, these people would be as enabled or even more than what we are here in a first world country. Real estate, like the one I said, was a great use for this. Who here hates leaving their rented apartment because you never, ever see your deposit money again? I do, right? I've been living in LA, and I tell you what, like for the past, 15 so years I've been living there, not single one time I got 100% of my deposit back. And trust me, I'm like, I take care of the property. Like, I'm not like trashing it out and throwing parties. But that's a way real estate could work, right? You could put two people, a landlord and a tenant, together in a smart contract. That smart contract would operate automatically. If I return the apartment back in good conditions, I receive my full deposit. In case I skip payment, then I could technically be evicted automatically, or if my landlord does not fix my refrigerator, that payment of that month could be on hold. So those are some of the different applications a smart contract and a blockchain could use for real estate. Healthcare is another one. A lot of what we see in healthcare, which is very challenging, it is the share of data. So when you go to your doctor, how much data or your doctor can see and how much the pharmaceutical companies can get access to data, as well as you as a patient or a consumer, or your healthcare payer, your Kaiser Permanente of the world. Like, who has the access to that data? And can you monetize that data, right? Would you be willing to give your medical data and receive money for it? It's interesting to know that majority of healthcare studies are done with 20-something-year-old white males. Do you guys know why? Because these are the college kids that are willing to get paid for their medical data. So imagine in a world where everyone could monetize their healthcare data, how much more of an advancement we could have, and people could actually get paid for that. Supply chain is such a low-hanging fruit and a great use case of blockchain. As you can see, all these different players in the supply chain today have to do heavy paperwork. Right? When I go into corporate education scenarios and I try to explain why blockchain is this whole impressive thing, is I tell people, well, how much paperwork goes around in your operation? How many FedEx envelopes do you ship out daily, right? You could eliminate all of that. Like back offices of banks, so, trade finance, things that get shipped around the world, all that could be eliminated. And all those costs could be significantly reduced because you're going to get assets, goods, and transit all together into one transaction automated throughout the chain. Here's an interesting graph, and I'm happy to share this presentation with you guys. So think about, like the previous speaker mentioned, you create a block and you chain that block to the forward one, right? So if I like, let's think about canned tuna. Who here doesn't like canned tuna, right? So the manufacturer of canned tuna sources the fish, puts it in a can, and then creates a block with the certificate of origin, the batch number, and then packages, right? Then it creates another block with the shipment date of that canned tuna. You want to eat fresh canned tuna. You don't want to eat old canned tuna, right? So now you have two blocks. Now it goes to the warehouse that's going to ship it out. That warehouse creates another block with another certificate of origin, checks the batch number, and moves on into a production date, right? Puts it in a box and creates a following block. Now, you already went a third of the process of the supply chain. What happens? The guy who fished the tuna back in, let's say, Maine, is entitled to receive a third of his payment, right? Because already a third of that supply chain happened. As it moves along, the shipment, the trucking, the temperature of inside the truck, right? You want to make sure that it's all fresh, is all being recorded in these different blocks until it arrives to the retailer, which then makes a final payment to everyone in the chain. So you can integrate fractional payments throughout the chain and include all the players in the supply chain. Here's an example of what's actually being done. People talk about that there are not that many applications of supply chain, but there actually are. Some of the companies are already doing it, including Walmart and Falanghina Wine, which uses the blockchain to track where were the grapes sourced, like were they really sourced in Italy or were they sourced in California, right? What was the quality of those grapes? When was it bottled? What kind of verification was it done, and where was it distributed? I don't know if you guys are familiar, but in China, there is a massive counterfeiting of expensive wine. So people there are paying, $5,000 for a Petrus and drinking, what is that one here that we drink in California? Like a Robert Mondavi kind of lower grade wine. So you could use the blockchain to verify that you're drinking really $5,000 bottles of wine. Arts and entertainment is another one. I advise for a project called ArtBit, where one of our key members is Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses, right? So imagine if Guns N' Roses decides to do a new song with, let's say, Steve Tyler. So you could use the blockchain to separate the different royalty payments so that Steve Tyler would get his portion of writing the song and Guns N' Roses would get their portion of the song by creating a new version and playing it around the world. And automatic smart contracts will make that payment seamlessly as we, consumers, consume the IP or download the song or it gets played in a commercial. So how many times does it get played and aired would be automatically payments as well. Another one that I was speaking with my friend Melissa here is about verification of your education and credentials. Right? Did you really go to MIT? One of the things I tell my students all the time is that, I've been a long time in school and never ever someone asked me to show my diploma. Did that ever happen to you? We're all developers here. You guys are highly educated. You spend a a ton of money in your education? Did you ever go into an actual meeting or interview that they said, show me your diploma? Right? I've never. So MIT is actually working on this, where your records will be stored in the blockchain, and you can use an application on your phone to send it over to your new employer, to post it on LinkedIn, Facebook, to share it via Google Drive, or to just place it on a link on your personal web page. Energy is another great use case. You have a very fragmented situation today where we have distributors, banks that pay your water and power bill, and we could all change that by making sure that, for example, wind energy and solar energy get placed on the blockchain, and a trading platform will allow the producers and us, the consumers, to pay and receive that energy. And that's already happening in places like Australia. And I'll go over that in a couple of slides. Insurance is another major one, because you can create blocks of transactions for different parts and different players and different segments of the insurance entire chain, right? So for sales and distribution, you could have agents' contracts, you could have customer details, you could have new policy updates all in one block. As it moves into the underwriting business, because now you have a claim, you can have health records, DMV records, property details, all stored in another block, which is chained to the policies and to the original details. Right? So now, what kind of services are you going to get when you called Geico? That could be policy renewals. Those could be updated in following blocks that would be chained. And claim management. Now you want to receive your money. Right? Insurance fraud is one of the biggest costs in the insurance industry. Imagine if you could mitigate that by creating an additional block where you could have payments stored and fraud management, as well as auto identification of these claims and how do they work. So here are a couple of real examples, right? I just went over the use cases. What could we do? But here are some real examples. So Velux RE is already doing this in Chicago, where they're storing on the blockchain the deeds and the titles of property, so that you could sell your house and pass it over to the next buyer without going through an escrow account. In supply chain management, food blockchain.xyz is doing that whole tracking of production, like I mentioned, so that our sole believer here that we're eating only organic food can be certain that we are really eating organic food. And the big giant Walmart is actually using blockchain today to track two things: mangoes from Mexico and pork from China, to make sure that you're getting quality products, right? Healthcare Convex is also doing the same thing with blockchain and storing data and healthcare data so that it could be shared and it could help the improvement of pharmaceutical goods and payments of people that participate in the supply chain. When you talk about entertainment and payments of royalties, open music is a collaboration between really large players like Sony Music, Warner, YouTube, Netflix, Spotify. All these guys are now part of open music, which is really looking at blockchain to improve the payments of royalties. And Conjol is one of the examples that I went over of sharing energy and payments of energy among peer-to-peer folks that have solar panels on their house. So if you have a solar panel on your house, you can join Conjol, and whatever you have as additional energy that your solar panel captured, you could resell that to your neighbor who's unfortunately doesn't have a solar panel yet. We went over the MIT example with certificates and diplomas on the blockchain. Retail Everledger is one that has been registering diamonds, right? You bought a diamond for your wife. How certain are you that that's a real diamond? How certain are you that that's not a blood diamond, right? So Everledger is doing that to make sure that the diamond you paid, whatever, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, depending how much you love your wife, is actually a real diamond from a real source. AXA Insurance is also using the blockchain to make sure that the processes and payments of their insurance are automated. In Brazil, where people claim that the previous election of the president, who was recently impeached, was fraudulent, and some of the folks here in the US also talk about how our election was fraudulent. They're thinking about using blockchain to verify votes and verify the election process. American Express, who some of you here might have an American Express, and it's all about your points and your rewards, is actually partnering with Ripple to make sure that their transactions of points and rewards becomes automated, immutable, and stored in a decentralized ledger. Obviously, finance, we have so many applications. I just wanted to show Gemini as a US-based exchange for cryptocurrencies and crypto assets. You can, add to that Coinbase, Bittrex, and a bunch of other ones. But why are we willing to tokenize these assets? What is the real benefit for us all here and for the economy of tokenizing these transactions? Real estate is definitely a good one, because I would love to own a house in beachfront Malibu, but I don't have that money, right? But if I could fractionalize that house and own a percentage of it, and that being stored in a distributed ledger, and I could transact that 1% of that house, then that's a benefit, because then it would allow investors who are not necessarily accredited investors or multimillionaires to drop 20 million in a Malibu house to take advantage of the appreciation of such a real estate asset. Startups is another one. So I've been affiliated with Tech Coast Angels, which is the largest angel group in America, for a few years now. And until today, until blockchain, that was something that only people that had more than $1 million in cash, which the US government tells us all, you're only accredited if you have over $1 million in assets, in liquid assets, and that does not include your house. Right? So unless you're rich, you cannot invest in startups. But now you can. And obviously mature companies. Right, companies that are not necessarily public, but are mature, like a chain of restaurants or parking lots, right? Airport parking lots, not necessarily they are public companies that you could buy their stock. They could now be tokenized, and that token could be distributed, and people could get access to that investment. Energy is one that we talked about. You could capture energy on solar panels and resell it, and not necessarily be hostage to your local water and power company. Art is another one. I would love to own a Picasso, still working on getting that money, you could own a portion of a great piece of art. And obviously funds, right? That would also be a low-hanging fruit, or you could own a part of a fund. So I'm sure many of you here are familiar with Sequoia, the famous VC company in California. But try to get a LP position at Sequoia. You can't knock on their door and say, hey, can you let me in with my $100 bill? No, there is a minimum. You are going to have to be accredited. There's not enough allocation. And if you get in, most likely you're going to have redemption, lockups, where they don't want you to get out. But with a tokenization of a fund or an investment vehicle, you could get that position that you have and resell it to your friend, right? Or if you have 2/3 of a startup that deals with, let's say, parking lots, you could trade for 1/3 of a high-tech startup with another investor in an early stage startup environment. So some of the benefits of tokenization is definitely automated revenue sharing. So if you own a piece of a startup, do you get a check for that today? No, you don't, right? You hopefully pray to God that in 7 years, on average, that startup will exit and you will see some of your funds back. But with tokenization of assets, you could get a portion of that startup increasing revenue. Fundraising. Fundraising is a big one. If you have an idea for a company, you don't need to go out to my friends at Tech Coast Angels and try to convince them that you have the greatest idea since sliced bread. You can create a campaign online and do a crowdfunding on steroids. Obviously, all these traded assets and tokenized assets could be traded 24/7 across the world, and you don't need any brokers. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with the difference between utility and securities tokens, but if you're not, this is what mostly happened this year. We got 2016, 17 with all these smart contracts and crazy fundraisings of companies raising billions of dollars through this crowdfunding mechanism called ICOs. Right? Then the Securities Exchange Commission came and dropped the hammer and said, wait a minute, this is fraudulent. You're taking money from grandma, all right? Let's stop this. So they broke down the system into 2 types of tokens, utilities and security tokens. My research at UCLA is mainly focused on security tokens, and I'm a big believer that security tokens are the future, because if I'm going to get into a contract, if I'm going to invest in a startup, I want to make sure that that's regulated. I would rather give my money to Chase, which is FDIC insured and went through regulatory scrutiny of being able and responsible to hold my money, than to give my money to someone I don't even know where they live or what kind of recourse I would have. So if you look on utility token, which according to the SEC, there's only 2, Bitcoin and Ethereum, is one that will give you future access to something, right? Think about it as I have a pool in my house, and then I sell you little coins that will allow you to come jump on my pool on a hot Sunday. That's a utility coin. You got access to that, right? But anything aside from that is deemed to be a security token. Any kind of investment, anything that you think you would make money out of, would be a security token. And if you really want to go deep into this, people have been speaking about this for for a few years. It's the Howey test. And the Howey test is so broad and so flexible that It's nearly impossible for you to have a utility token in the current scenario in America. So people are doing, in the past year, ICOs and raising capital. Those are folks that are very brave, in my opinion, and that are challenging the SEC. But the market size continues to grow. In the first quarter of 2018, we had more than double the amount raised in 2017 in ICOs. So although we are in a bear market, the industry of ICOs continues to grow, right? You have all these structures of pre-sales and post-sales. We've been doing research, and I can't give you details right now because we're still finalizing it, but in general, we looked at over 1,600 different ICOs, and the average between a pre-sale and a sale was a 10x. So people that bought coins on pre-sales were 10xing their money at the point of sale when it went public. And obviously, soft and hard caps are what usually these campaigns set it as minimum and ceilings of what they want to raise. But here's what I really want to communicate is the advent of a security token. Something that you are not going to feel it's a scam. Your company is not going to get subpoenaed. You're going to be able to crowdfund and legitimately pay back your backers, your initial investors through these tokens. So a security token is a representation of value, whatever it is, a piece of art, a fraction of your house, a percentage of your company that's under securities law, example, the SEC. And it could be a representation of equity, debt, derivatives, or even real estate, right? And that the whole idea of a security token is that the representation of that value is programmable based on a smart contract. So if I tell you that you're going to invest in my company, and throughout the life of my company, as long as you hold that token, I'm going to pay you back 25% of profits, which is actually our project, a little bit of a shameless plug here of our fund, is that we pay back 25% of profits. You're going to get that 25% annually automatically. And there's nothing I could do to change that, and there's nothing you could do to change that because it's immutable and built into a smart contract. So, what?
Even if you went under?
Well, I guess if you went under, then you went under, right?
It's not totally guaranteed.
But that's the whole idea, right? If you go under, the money is gone, right? Yeah, I could see that, but that, you know,
It's still a risk.
Life is a risk, darling. But to your point, it's a very good question. You know, the point is that if the money is there, I cannot stop paying you.
Okay.
Right? You also have liquidity, which is a great point, because liquidity of ownership of a startup is close to zero. And I'll tell you from the angel world, the average successful angel investment takes 7 years to exit. So you write a check, and then you hope to God that in 7 years that company will exit. And the average exit is about 3 to 5x. Right? But in the meantime, you could get a valuation, an increased valuation. Like I heard from my friends here in Atlanta that Bird and Lime, those scooters, are in town. And if you're following the news, that's something that is popular right now, right? So if I was an early investor in that company, I could get my share in that company and sell it to some of you who might be enjoying riding a scooter around Atlanta and think that that's the next Uber for an upside. So usually in the world today, when you're trying to liquidate a position in a startup, you will get a haircut. With the advent of a security token, you will potentially get an increase in the valuation of the price you paid. You're also going to get democratization of capital markets. So smaller companies could have access to things that big companies now that are traded on NASDAQ are having. And you're going to have efficiency, right? Goldman Sachs in 2016 said that about back office costs of doing these trades of equities is about $6 billion a year. Imagine if that's automated and you could fire all those people. That's $6 billion that goes back into the system. Automated compliance. So if I'm buying something and I'm a legitimate player and you're selling something and your company is a legitimate player, that compliance is going to go like this instead of in 2 days, right? Fractional ownership, an efficient path to a fraction of high valued assets, and reconciliation. So reconciliation is a big issue in equities, right? So if I own a piece of the company and I sell it to you, then it takes a few days for that to happen, right? So for that, the books to be updated. And that, with security tokens, could be automated. So just as a recap, what are the benefits of a security token? Mainly 24/7 markets, doesn't stop. If you trade Bitcoin, if you trade any alternative coin, you know this. Rapid settlement and automated compliance. Like if I'm a legitimate player and someone is trying to sell me something and they are not a legitimate player, that compliance will not go through. But if they are, it will go automatically. Reduction of direct costs and asset interoperability. I could sell a fraction of a house here in Atlanta to someone in China who has never been to Atlanta. All right? And the expansion of the space of these smart security contracts and institutional investors. So one of the things that we were talking to pension funds is, how do you convince a pension fund, or for example, of the University of Georgia, to invest in cryptocurrencies? They will never do that because one, is not regulated, and two, it's other people's money, right? It's all the professors and faculties. But now with security tokens, tokens that are actually regulated and have efficient smart contracts, you could give the pension fund of the University of Georgia the opportunity to invest in cryptocurrencies, crypto assets, and tokenized values. But we still see some problems and some solutions. Problems are still mainly lack of scale. Most tokens are still on Ethereum, which, as we all know, doesn't have that much volume. Interoperability among blockchains. If you've been in the space, you know that Bitcoin doesn't talk to Ethereum. They're kind of like divorced significant others. And privacy issues, right? You can look at it from both ways. I might not want my wife to know how much money I have in the bank. Or you might, as a supplier, might not want all your customers to know the different prices you operate for different clients. So privacy is still an issue. But we got a lot of opportunities. We got about 2 to 3 billion people that are unbanked that could have access to the same kind of services you and I have because we bank with Bank of America or Chase. Records will be immutable. There will be no middleman. And there will be interoperable wallets, right? Wallets that I could do exchanges of the different tokens that I have, whatever they are, with you right here on the fly, just by sending you. Kind of like if I PayPal you or Venmo you some money. Some of the news, we've been all following the news. But here's what I think the future is, and then I'll open it for questions. This is what we have right now, blocks. But the new blockchain, in my opinion, are going to be directed acyclic graphs, or DAGs, which is one block talks to another instead of creating a chain of blocks, right? This is going to solve a lot of problems with consensus as well as volume of transactions. So for example, if we look at the volumes of transactions, you could do a Bitcoin transaction in about 5 seconds, but 5 transactions per second, sorry. On Ethereum platform, you could do maybe 15 transactions per second. But if we take it to the real world, where we all have Visa and MasterCard, we're in need of something like 50,000 transactions per second. And DAGs are proven to operate at something close to 100,000 transactions per second, which will empower having more people, like the 2 to 3 billion people that are unbankable, into the blockchain world. I think that 2019 is going to be the year of institutional investors. Goldman Sachs already is operating under Circle, the largest trading desk of cryptocurrencies. Security token exchanges, in my opinion, we're going to start seeing them in the beginning of this year. You're going to be able to trade security tokens just like you trade Bitcoin and Ethereum and alternative coins. And I think we're going to solve atomic swaps. All right? You're going to be able to change an Ether for a Bitcoin or a security token for another security token seamlessly, where public blockchains will communicate with each other, and banks and governments will have these private blockchains that will touch on the public network, but with certain restrictions. So an integration of all the blockchains. I also see this as the future. As I mentioned to you guys, I come from the early stage, old school of investment. But if you're a startup, why are you going to go to a room filled with grumpy people who are trying to make you look like a fool to give you a check, if you can present your idea on the internet and talk to the specific audience that is relatable to your idea and raise money from them? As a final word, I would like to quote Lou Kerner, who is a famous VC in the West Coast, and talk about Amara's law, which is a famous law that I think also relates to blockchain and to the potential of blockchain. And it's about, when we think about blockchain, Lou says, I think about Amara's law, which states we tend to overestimate the effects of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effects of this technology in the long run. And with that, my friends, I would like to open it for questions, and thank you so much for your time and being here. Yes, gentlemen.
So I want to go back to the security token question.
Sure.
Because when I come from a wealth management background in technology as well, and a couple of startups, so the capital raising side and building out a business. But within a security token, there are effectively 3 types that I identify. There are asset-backed, which actually have a full equity ownership stake. There are what we call semi-asset-backed, where you might get some revenue, but not necessarily all of it. And then there are non-asset-backed, where you have a loose affiliation with the business of the brand and you hope it appreciates the value. And I think this is where she was coming from. There are different risks for those 3 groups, right?
Yes.
And so my question is, 1, what's your reaction to that? But 2, do you have any idea of all the entrepreneurs you're talking to that are raising capital, what are the ratios of how many are in those buckets? Because you don't really know what you own, and if you don't own anything, there's an asymmetrical payoff, right? There's more risk for the investor and more optional upside for the entrepreneurs, and that asymmetry, I think, is what they really need to pay attention to and concerned about. So I'm trying to stitch it together in a way that makes sense on both sides.
Sure. The candid answer, the politically correct answer is, it will be a reflection of what you have existing today. The candid answer is that a security token will become what we see in paper today when these security tokens, at least in the US, can reach a Reg A plus status, right? Which is a fully regulated paper contract that can be offered to anyone. As of today, I don't know of any Reg A plus security token. What we have mostly today are security tokens in the US that are still on the phase of accredited investors only, a D506C. So it's still very risky. I agree with the lady over there. Highly risky environment. But as we evolve and we get more security tokens into this quote unquote Reg A plus fully regulated, we will get to the politically right answer to your question, which will be an exact reflection of what you have today in these three buckets, right? You have some that have more risk, some that have less risk, some that are more tied to equity, some are more tied to payment, and so forth. Especially with institutional investors coming in.
Yeah, I have two questions based on your use cases.
Sure.
Healthcare. So in your negatives, you talk about the processing of Bitcoin. You showed a number. However, as you increase the size of the information contained in the block, a health record, being able to cryptographically process that block, it exponentially increases. So you've got, you look at a health record, it might be 6 or 8 inches over a lifetime, maybe even more, depending on health. So how is that going to impact? You showed with the DAG, that would be 100,000. I would like to say that's probably nowhere close. It's going to be substantially less. And second of all, so that's one. How do you deal with things that aren't just simply who's got the block, it's hash, it's previous hash, that information which tends to be very small. How are we going to solve that problem because the computational issues are substantial? And then the other one relates to the fact that we said everybody can see inside the block. There are no role-based controls today. When are those coming? Because let's say I've got a medical issue, I broke my arm, but I'm also a person that suffers depression. I wouldn't want my orthopedist that's dealing with my arm knowing I have some other issue that's none of their business. So when are those two things do you believe are going to be solved?
Sure. So Hashgraph, I know the team at Hashgraph, and I'm a big supporter of what they're trying to do. The idea of DAGs, to your first question on the block size, is that you're not going to need a specific block size, right? Which is the problem with Bitcoin. Block is just a certain size, and it holds about 300 transactions or so, depending on the transaction, and then you have to create another block. With a DAG, and I'll try to go back to the graph there, is that each of those bubbles will connect to all the other bubbles. So if I'm trying to find, for example, to your healthcare question and trying to tie those up into one single answer, if I want to try to find what happened in your doctor's visit back in 1998, then instead of having to go through all the different sized blocks and reading all those and creating what you're alluding to, like a computational problem, I will just like bypass all those and go directly into the block that was issued in 1998 and read that information. So the idea of DAGs is that you're not chaining one block on top of the other and having to read all the chain. You're connecting them all together. The other part which you mentioned, which talks about privacy, we're already having different protocols of blockchain. And my friend Antonio here from Beta Blocks can certainly give you more technical information on that. Different types of blockchains like the Hyperledger gives you different permissions of access, right? So for example, the Bitcoin blockchain is no difference in permission. You could see the whole entire chain. But within other types of blockchains like EOS, like Hyperledger, or some of the other ones, like Hashgraph, you could give permissions. So your arm doctor could not see your immune records. Yeah.
Okay, that's not, it doesn't, okay, it really doesn't do that yet. It's, I think, a bit more architecture than it is reality. Okay, go back to the DAG here for a second. So part of the blockchain is being able to look from current hash back to the previous hash and so on and so forth. So if I take the furthest left block, and then it's got to connect to the furthest right, I'm going to have to then sequentially check or run proof of work or proof of statement or proof of time elapsed time to somehow be able to track that all the way back. It's sequential. That's where the blocks look at. I'm not understanding how that's going to work.
So one of the ideas of these DAGs is that you're not going to have to run the proofs, right? They're just interconnected.
But if you don't run the proofs, then you're suddenly believing that, then I'm going to believe it without the proof. And that's part of why blockchain is there. You've got proof of work, or proof of stake, or proof of elapsed time. These proofs are one of the things that give you a surety that I don't need trust now, I can prove it mathematically. And if I'm not able to walk the chain back in a snap, back 5 years or 10 years, and I have the record, I'm going to have to assume it's right without having checked it with my proof of whichever one you want to use.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the potential advents, right, and we haven't seen that yet, and I agree with you, because a lot of these are promises and not actionable protocols that are happening, right? So Hashgraph, we have maybe 2 projects on it that are actually running. So they are theoretical ideas. Huh? Works in progress. Any last question? Nope. Well, I would like to thank you so much for coming. It's the greatest honor to have you share your time here. Really appreciate. Here is my email. You can send me an email whenever you feel like asking a question, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Appreciate it.